Hello friends, it's Alexa, and today I'm going to talk about the books that I managed to read in the last half of December compared to the number of books that I managed to read in the first half of the month. Second half of the month was a bit of a slower reading month. There were quite a few books I didn't know how to rate at first, which rarely happens, but when it does, it always gets me thinking about how I really feel about books and what elements I really look for and really find to be important to me. Without further ado, let's get to talking about the book. The first book I read was a book that was on my December TBR, and that book is The Forgetting by Sharon Cameron. This one is about a girl named Nadia who lives in a city named Canaan. And in Canaan, every single citizen has a book where they write about their daily lives, their truths, their feelings, their thoughts, and all of that. And every 12 years in the city, an event known as The Forgetting happens, and the books are all that these people have to figure out the truth about their lives. The thing is, Nadia has never forgotten, ever. She's the only one who knows the actual truth, which is that people are being manipulated by someone else. She sets out on a journey to discover what is actually going on. The thing about this book is, the beginning of it was really slow for me, to the point where I almost dropped it because I was like, I'm not feeling it. It's not clicking with me. This definitely affected my overall feelings for the book, but there is a turning point, and it just so happened that right when I was about to give up, I hit that turning point and it got really intense and really interesting. I wasn't expecting the direction the author would take with this story. For me, that's usually either a good or a bad thing. In this case, it was a really good thing. Past that turning point, it was really an adventure that I wanted to be a part of and to find out the ending for, and that's what kept me going. I like the characters well enough. I think Nadia was very interesting considering the circumstances she's in and all the things she's trying to balance. She was complicated enough that she still had a difficult time figuring out what was right and what was wrong and like what she should do, and I thought that was great. And I loved some of the secondary characters, particularly Gray, who is the boy that Nadia kind of teams up with in this story. Things that did bring this down were like the beginning, which was kind of slow, and I also kind of felt like the beginning also had a lot of nods or similarities to other YA books I've read. But overall, I wound up being really glad I read this book. I ended up giving this book a 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was actually an early copy of Roseblood by A.G. Howard, and this is a Phantom of the Opera inspired story. It's about a girl named Rune who is sent by her mother to go to a French conservatory for music. Her mom hopes that going to the conservatory will help Rune overcome her stage fright and train her voice. Rune has been gifted with a supernatural ability to sing opera. It is this ability that sort of ties her into the fate of being someone lured in by the Phantom of the Opera. It's also at this school that she meets a boy named Thorn who helps her hone her abilities and who kind of gives her the peace that she's been looking for many, many years. This is another one where I was like torn on how to express what I felt about it. It's weird. It is really weird. And the writing is kind of choppy and odd and like it's really hard to get into. The thing is, I'm always really interested in seeing what authors do when they try to take inspiration from or integrate a classic story into their story, and I think that what A.G. Howard did was a very interesting thing. It wasn't what I was expecting, but it made sense, and I think she did a good job conceptualizing the story and coming up with the things that she combined to create it. This one took me a while to get into. A lot of that had to do with the writing. I didn't feel like the characters were well developed, but even though I had my problems with this one, I still thought it was fairly interesting and fairly unique. I gave this one a 3.25 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read is actually a book that Rachel and I will be talking about for Friends with ARC. That book is By Your Side by Casey West. This is the story of a girl named Autumn who gets left behind and locked into a library for the weekend. She thinks she's alone, but then she finds out that she's there with someone she knows from school, Dax Miller. He's not necessarily a guy that she has crossed paths with too much before, but over the weekend they get to know each other and form a kind of friendship. It's after leaving the library that Autumn is forced to really consider how much that friendship means to her and in the grand scheme of her life, how it fits in. This book, as usual, is very cute. Casey West really knows how to write a romantic comedy type story, but I also feel like there was weird pacing in it. The one thing that I do want to point out that I really enjoyed about it was the way that Casey West integrated anxiety into Autumn's personality, because the way that Autumn experiences anxiety in this story is a lot like the way I experience it, although mine is to a milder level. So that was really interesting to read about and also unexpected, and I liked that a lot. I wasn't necessarily incredibly invested in the story, but it was the kind of cute and fluffy story that I wanted to read at the time. It did make me smile and there were definitely good moments and moments of swoon, but I also got frustrated because there were a lot of like complicated scenarios that I thought were a bit over the top in terms of drama. In the end, this was a good way to pass the time. It was a nice, cute read, and I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. And then I read a book called The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. It's about a girl named Vasilisa, and she and her family live up in the frozen sort of northern end of Rus, I think that's what it's called in the book. This is like a time when they're sort of moving into the age of religion and belief in God, and the old gods are getting forgotten. Vasilisa finds herself on the edge of a war because they're starting to forget the old god. There's this great evil that is coming and threatens to like bring darkness and death. It's up to Vasilisa to really find her inner strength and figure out how she can keep her people, her land, all of that safe. I really thought this was a dreamy book. It has a great fairy tale feel to it, which I really love because I love fairy tales. The integration of the different folklore elements was so interesting. I don't really know too much about Russian folklore. I'm not too familiar with it, but I like the way that I was able to pick up on like the different creatures and the different beliefs and all of that just by reading the story. So that was really cool. I also feel like this book was another one that had kind of a slow start. Eventually it finds its footing, and that's great. It's even better when it gets to the point where Vasilisa is actively making her own decisions and working to save her family and her people and her land and the creatures that she has known all her life and loves and respect. That made it interesting. Overall, I thought this was very, very interesting, very, very lovely in terms of the writing. It was one of those reads that I would recommend to people to read during the winter time because that's just the vibe I get from it. I ended up giving that book a 4 out of 5 stars. I read another advanced copy, and that was for The Cursed Queen by Sarah Fine, and this is companion sequel to The Imposter Queen. I really enjoyed The Imposter Queen, but I really enjoyed this a little bit more. It's set in the same world, but you're not in the same place. You're actually with a tribe known as the Krigeri, and at the very beginning of the book, they are trying to attack the land where the Valtia, who is like the queen of fire and ice, is from, and they're defeated. While there are shifting like politics and people that need to, you know, be won over by Thyra as she becomes their new leader, they're also given this offer by her banished uncle, so they make this journey to where the uncle now is. This book is just like this incredible combination of internal conflict for Ansa, who is our main narrator, the tribe, which obviously has its own internal conflict without the new leadership, and the external conflict of like neighboring lands and all of that. Sarah Fine just really brings it all together really well. I wasn't expecting to enjoy this one as much as I did, but I really liked it. I think it was very interesting to see Ansa's take on all of these things and like how she reacted, what she chose to do, how she was affected by certain things. I was just completely swept up in it right from the beginning, which is always a nice feeling, and I was pretty much just invested until the very end, which is definitely a nice feeling. Ansa is a great character. She's strong, and she has a certain way of looking at the world, and that way gets challenged a lot in this book, which I really like. All in all, this one was definitely really enjoyable. It was definitely a good fantasy adventure. I enjoyed the characters, I enjoyed their relationship. I think that Sarah Fine does a really good job at making the world complex and at giving us a story different from the first one, but also still connected to it. Obviously, if you couldn't tell, I really liked this book. I ended up giving this one a 4.5 out of 5 stars. The last book that I read in 2017 was a sequel that I was actually really looking forward to, Wind Witch by Susan Dennard. This is the sequel to Truth Witch. I can't really tell you too much about what the plot in this one is because it's a sequel and it would kind of spoil the first book for you, but it's still features the same characters. They are still continuing on. Wind Witch. How do I talk about Wind Witch? This is difficult, guys, because I really expected to 100% love this book as much as Truth Witch, and I didn't. I like Eowyn and Isolde. They're still my favorite, and I think like their part of this story was really fun to read and like really well done, and it made me very curious about what would happen next to those two. I like Safi well enough. The person I actually did not like reading from as much was Merrick. I don't know if it's because I personally just could not stand how he was in this book. I didn't enjoy Merrick as much as I hoped I would. The world has definitely opened up, and we've learned more about the different cultures and people. New Brevna, we definitely learned about, especially Lovat, and the contested lands as well. We've learned a little bit more about them. And in that sense, it was kind of cool to see the world grow bigger, but I kind of had a hard time with the way the perspectives switch in this book. It kind of felt like too rough. I also felt like the beginning of the book kind of threw readers into a situation that was really completely unexpected. And that happens again towards the end of the book where I'm like, oh, the game has completely changed. While that is not a terrible thing, I think it's just something that I personally have to come to terms with it, I guess. I will continue with the series. I just did not love this as much as I thought I would, so I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. Those are all the books I read in the last 2 weeks of 2016. I'm looking forward to reading a bunch more books in the new year. If you guys want to talk to me about any of these books or you have thoughts on any of them, please leave a comment down below. I would love to see what you have to say. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys for another video soon. Bye!